Go ahead, Jacqui.
Thanks, Jen. In the past, you've said that domestic oil producers have the leases, resources that they need to ramp up production. Is there any thought about invoking the Defense Production Act when it comes to energy?
Well, there are a range of ideas out there. That's one of them that a number of people have put forward. I would say that the Defense Production Act would mean giving government funding to companies or to purchase products. That's how it typically works, as you've seen it work with COVID supplies and otherwise. And we think they have the resources they need in order to expand their production.
And then on government money and supplies, there are reports that the EU is seeking to stockpile iodine pills and nuclear protective gear amid an increased concern about a nuclear threat, and also looking for more ways to deal with potential biological and chemical attacks. Is the U.S. taking similar measures when it comes to these things, especially with iodine pills? Are we taking sort of the lessons learned from the pandemic and applying it to this challenge?
Sure, Jacqui. It's a good question. Let me check with our national security team and see if there's any details I can get into. We are always prepared, even as we aren't making predictions at this point in time. I don't have confirmation of that report about the Europeans, but I will check and see if there's more to report out to all of you.
There are reports that China has fully militarized at least 3 islands in the disputed South China Sea with anti-ship, anti-aircraft missile systems, laser and jamming equipment, and fighter jets, despite Beijing's promises not to turn these islands into military bases. What is our takeaway from that, and how are we responding to that?
Well, Jacqui, I don't have confirmation of that from here. I've certainly seen the reports. I would point you to the Department of Defense for any more specific analysis, but obviously any escalatory actions in the South China Sea would be of concern to us.
And then one more on the White House assessment of global food insecurity
Yeah.
that's sort of coming out of all this in
Sure.
Ukraine. Is there any money that's going to be allocated to provide diesel fuel to Ukrainian farmers to try to mitigate some of this?
Yeah, let me give you a couple of things on this, because there's been a lot of interesting reporting on this, and where the impacts are is a good question. While we're not expecting a food shortage here at home, we do anticipate that higher energy, fertilizer, wheat, and corn prices could impact the price of growing and purchasing critical food supplies for countries around the world. And early estimates from the World Bank suggest disproportionate impacts on low and middle income countries, including in Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. And Ukraine is a big exporter of fertilizer. So as it relates to even that need in the United States and other parts of the world, that's something that we're continuing to closely assess as well. But right now, to go back to the root of your question, we are working with our partners in the G7, multilateral development banks, the World Food Program, and the UN Food and Agriculture Organization to mitigate the impacts to poorer nations. So we are discussing what that looks like and how to mitigate the shortage on those growing and purchasing entities from impacting parts of the world that would be severely impacted, even if we're not.
What kind of a timeline do we think we have to take some action on that before it becomes a really big problem?
Well, there are active discussions now, and we're certainly mindful that even if we're not seeing an impact in this moment, that sometimes supply chain impacts can have having a lagging impact. So we're having discussions now with all of those partners. Those have been ongoing, so we can do everything we can to mitigate it in advance.
Can I ask one question, just a reaction to the Israeli Prime Minister this weekend? He said on the JCPOA, unfortunately, we're seeing a determination to sign a nuclear deal at almost any cost, including saying that the biggest terrorist group in the world is not a terrorist organization. This is too steep a price. Can I get your reaction to that? Is that what we're saying by pursuing this deal?
I would say we are in regular touch with our Israeli counterparts, including leaders. We don't have a deal yet. We're consulting with our allies and partners, including Israel, as we negotiate, and the president's going to make a decision on whether to re-enter the deal based on what's in the best interest of American security and strategic interests, including the security of our partners in regions like Israel. And if and when we have a deal, I'm sure we can discuss more specifics. Go ahead.